The Buddhists talk about the three marks of existence, the three Dharma seals, the three things that you can see in all truth. They're a good way of weeding out what's right from what's really our ego talking. They're not perfect for that, but they're a really good start. But for those of us who haven't really employed them or brought them into our practice, they really are the three keys of wisdom. And so these are the three keys that we're going to be using to open all kinds of gates as we go and walk together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan Druid. I'm joined by my husband, Brian.
Hello.
Today, we are going to be talking about the three keys. I'm trying to root everything into our practice, into my practice, and what hopefully will maybe be yours as well. When I was working on A Dream of an Oak Church, one of the things that I did is I composed a triad for each of the main ideas throughout it as a way of giving something to meditate on, something to think about, something to connect with as we are doing this work. The triad for the gate of three keys is: three keys unlock the gate of wisdom. All compound things are impermanent and unsatisfying. All paths reveal ever-changing and interconnected being, and Sabbath is enlightened rest. The glory of a triad is that it takes three things and it puts them together to get you to question, how are these interconnected? How are they interrelated? How are these three the one thing? How do these three things unlock the gates of wisdom? The first key is the most important one. That is impermanence. The three marks of reality, the three keys, if you're not familiar with them, are impermanence, interconnectedness, and liberation. Or impermanence, no self, and nirvana, as they would be said in a more traditional manner. And it's that first one that unlocks a lot of gates, especially for those of us coming from either a Christian perspective or from a pagan perspective. I find it weird, especially amongst Reconstructionist pagans, how impermanence is not something that crosses their mind, even though it is the most natural earth-based wisdom that we have. Yes, we're connecting to the lore of our ancestors. Yes, we're connecting to the practices of our ancestors. Yes, we're trying to root ourselves in the tradition and to reconstruct it as best as we can. But we are not living in Iron Age agrarian society. We're not living in medieval agrarian society. I would hazard to guess that most of the people listening to the sound of my voice are not living in an agrarian society, because we don't have many of those left on Earth. I grew up on a farm. I grew up with us growing a lot of what we ate throughout the year. That's how I grew up. I like to say that I grew up in the 1850s because I learned how to cook on a Franklin pot-bellied wood stove. I know how to get that fire back up from the embers and how much wood that you want to put in, depending on what you're cooking on the top or what you're putting into the oven part of it. And those are very different sets of skills that don't help you.
I grew up, I would say, agrarian adjacent. I grew up in a rural community. The farm fields were next to the neighborhoods. There were farmers that I knew and interacted with, but the food that was grown was additional food. There was a garden in the yard, but it wasn't like if the garden didn't grow, we didn't eat. If the rabbits, the deer, myself, because I often was got the rabbits and deer blamed for eating stuff out of the garden because it was me grazing while playing. It wasn't like there was nothing to eat. The concept of food for my growing up was you went to the store, you got food, you brought it home. That was your food on the table. I didn't have that connectivity, and most people don't. And they don't even have even as much as I did. I wouldn't even call mine that connected.
We're reading the old stories. These are people that lived or died off of the health of their livestock, off of what came in the harvest that year. And we are separated from them. We don't have kings. Well, we're trying to have kings again, but we don't have kings and lords, and we're not living in that kind of world anymore. all traditions have to change. Like, the great thing about tradition is it's handed from one generation to the next, and each generation has the obligation, the right, and the responsibility to mold it to the times in which they are living, to pass on to the next generation who will do the same thing. All traditions should be growing and flourishing and changing. This is something that impermanence teaches us. Things are not always going to stay the same, and things haven't. One of the things that led me down the path that I'm in is when I was younger, and I've talked about this on previous episodes, but when I started digging into the history of Christianity and started seeing them talking about things different than the way we talked about things and having all kinds of ideas that we never talked about anymore. When was the last time you heard of someone talking about the Ember Days? Like, you go back not that long ago, and the Ember Days are really important church holidays that I don't know that there's a church that still practices them. If you know of one, let me know, because I think that would be interesting. But they were special fasting days that were scattered throughout the year because the Imperial Church didn't have enough reasons for people to go hungry, I guess. So they added a few more because why not? Right? There was a lot there. So when we're reconnecting, we are reconnecting. Yes, I want to know to the best of my ability, like in my devotion to Bridget, what were the stories that were told about her? What practices did people have in their devotion to her back then? I'm also interested in the medieval practices around Saint Bridget, or the Welsh practices around Saint Frey, or the Scottish practices around Saint Bride. All the same person, by the way. I'm not living in Wales or Scotland or Ireland, and I'm not living in the time that was written down when I'm reading the Carmina Gadelica, for example. I'm not living in the Outer Hebrides. I'm not living that life that these people were living. I need to understand how they lived and how this connected to their way of life, so I can understand how it might connect to me and my way of life and this more modern era that we live in. How does this work for us?
I find it very surprising sometimes when people don't want to recognize impermanence. As a matter of fact, they'll recognize the seasons. They'll accept that seasons happen. Well, that is change. Every year, it changes from spring to summer to fall to winter. And part of recognizing that all life is change, yes, sometimes it can be dark if you just look at the negative aspect. You can go down a dark path and go, well, what's the point? Because it's going to change. But the glory in that is recognizing that life is malleable.
Yes.
Yes, that means we have to put in effort. You
Yes.
have to harvest before you go into the winter, so that recognizing all life has changed, you can recognize, oh, this is a point in my life where I'm heading into a tougher time. So I'm going to gather up what I can now so that I can make it through the tougher time easier. But also recognizing that just because you may have made mistakes or have regrets, you can still change. Life is malleable. With a bit of effort, that change can happen. One of the more recent things, you look at the environmental crisis that we're all facing, because a large number of people were forced to change their daily habits, the environment actually got better for a little bit. It was just more proof that, yes, that is what's so wonderful about impermanence.
This really is the first key. It really helps us to remember that it is our job to change and to grow and to develop and to continue moving forward, and not to stay stuck, not to get stuck in a doomer mindset. I think doomerism
Yeah.
is such a problem because it's this idea that nothing ever changes. We're locked in. I don't believe in fatalism. I don't believe in nihilism. I don't believe in doomerism because everything is impermanent. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who was very convinced that the human species is going to go extinct. And I was told her, well, what life goes on. And she couldn't understand that. It's like, we've had so many mass extinctions on this planet. Life finds a way.
Yeah.
I think it's really going to be hard to eradicate life globally. Maybe a thermonuclear war might do it. Maybe. But remember, the entire Earth is frozen solid at least once. And I mean the oceans. There were
Yeah.
icebergs on the equator,
Yeah.
frozen solid several times, and life found a way through. We've had so many mass extinctions over time with the asteroid hitting the earth and killing off the dinosaurs, which is, I think, the one that most people know. But the dinosaurs came into existence after a mass extinction. And there were several before that. Change happens. Life finds a way. If we are truly agents of life, if that is what we are called for, that to me is what the oak wisdom is. If we are going to live Druidry to the best of our ability, it is we are the agents of life because we are living, not because we've been mandated by a divine force or a divine spirit to do something, but because everyone who is alive is an agent of life and should be working in service of life for the next generation. And that's the first key. Everything changes, which means not getting locked into things always having to stay the same, but also remembering everything can be changed. Nobody thought the British Empire could fall, but it did. No one thought the Spanish Empire could fall, but it did. No one thought the Roman Empire could fall, and it fell twice. Things change. Key two is interconnectedness, no self. This is one that scares people the most. If you've ever practiced Buddhism, this is where we start talking about things like shunyata and anatta, anatman. Now, if you're not familiar with these words, shunyata is emptiness. Anatta and anatman that's the Pali and the Sanskrit. Pali, P-A-L-I. And the Sanskrit for no self literally means no soul. Because your Atman is what goes from life to life to life. And these are radical ideas. And they're scary for people when they hear them for the first time. We want to think of ourselves as separate beings. We want to think of ourselves as what we experience our lives at. But again, impermanence. We are not a unified, unitary being. I do believe that there is part of us that is us. I'm not fundamentalist when it comes to this belief. I know there's some people that think that our existence as a separate self is a complete illusion. I think there is part of us that is us, but it is so interconnected and interwoven. Just starting with our body, we talk about this a lot. All of the microbiome that makes us possible. All of the plants and animals that have given their life to make our lives possible. The air, the sun, all of the things that just go into making our body possible, that our body is not a separate self. Then we go into our mind and our spirit and all of the relationships and all of the teachers and traditions and all of the wisdom that has come to us from all the different sources that make us who we are. We are not a separate self. I can't tease out what part of me is me and what part of me is that little Baptist child that was raised back in the day, or that very devout Catholic who used to volunteer with the nuns in Emmitsburg. Those feel like separate beings to me because I was living such different lives, but those are all interwoven into who I am. They all went into making me who I am. How much of me is John Vervaeke because I read a lot of his stuff? How much of me is Paul Tillich or Matthew Fox or Hildegard of Bingen? I can't tease all that out because I am a construct of all of these ideas, all of these notions that have gone into making me who I am. If internal family systems therapy is right, and as somebody who's a very big part of the metamodern movement, we accept the idea of the dividual human, that we're not individuals, we're actually dividuals, that there are a lot of different systems and parts moving around within us that each have their own demands and have their own interests in what we do, which is, I think, very simple to understand because you have your hunger urge, you have your sleep urge. You can see this very simply. You want to keep working, but you're very hungry and you need to stop, or you're very tired and you need to sleep. Those are different urges working within you. That we are a community of dividuals, that we are divisible into all these little parts.
This is something that you see repeated throughout many, many traditions. Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, you have the 10 parts, but it is one. It's all interconnected. It flows one into the other. Christianity, I and the Father are one, and in me I am one with you. It's all interconnected.
That when the Trinity was founded, that wonderful statement, I cannot think of the three without thinking of the one, and I cannot think of the one without thinking of the three. Even the biblical God that we're talking about, Elohim, was a council of gods in the original conception that you find in the book.
And in paganism, you have that connectivity with the self, with the community and the ancestors and the land, all interconnected.
This is a great source of wisdom. and also helps us from getting a little too full of ourselves. When I'm writing something, I don't know what part of me is, especially when I'm writing something about Buddhism or let's just do Druidry for a minute. How much of what I'm writing is the Philip Cargam part of me, or the John Michael Greer part of me, or the Penny Billington part of me, or the Newen? What part of me is channeling some Yolo Morganog thing from back in the day that I don't realize I'm connecting to, that I read once when I read the Barthas? I don't know. There's a certain humility there in realizing that there is this like internal council within me of all of these druids that I have read over time. All the works of Ross Nichols and all of these other people that I've read over time. How much of my magical writing is Dion Fortune or Israel Regardi or any of these people? I don't know, because their voices are very strong in my writing. Sometimes I can see it. There are times when I will read something back that I wrote and then frantically pull up somebody's book to make sure I didn't accidentally plagiarize them, because it just reads so much like one of my favorite writers. And so far, as best as I can tell, I've not done that, but I worry about it, because there are times when I can see that influence very strongly in what I'm doing. Some of my poetry, I see my favorite poets in it. That's that interconnectedness. It's on this very micro level where, as we're talking, I can't tell you who I am, because I am this chorus of voices and traditions that made me who I am now and will grow as I continue to work forward. I can't tell you what Druidry is, again, because of those voices. I can tell you how I practice Druidry and how I see these seven roots of Druidry that we feel are core to the practice, but they're not necessary. If somebody were to come to me and say that my Druidry looks like this, is it rooted in the tradition, right? Because we have two traditions that we're really pulling from as Druids, and both of us teach us impermanence and no self very strongly, because we have the lore. What's in the Welsh sources? What's in the Irish sources? What are in these traditional sources that we have? What did the Romans write about the Druids? But there's also those sources from the revival, Yolo Morgano and William Stuckney. I'm kind of obsessed with William Stuckney. I don't like love his work, but the way his mind worked fascinates me in a way. I'm actually working on some essays about what he did. I hunted down several of his books and read them, and were just, oh, oh my, like my brain don't work like that. And I think for better sometimes. It's very had a very interesting way of seeing things. But these are the people who kind of brought Druidry back. But I am in their tradition. Whether you know who Yolo Morgano is, if you call yourself a Druid and you draw those three lines and call it Awen, you're invoking Yolo, whether you know it or not, because that came from him. We are all interconnected and interwoven in this magical way, not even getting into how our lives and stuff stretches out into everything else. This is how we get wisdom from this key.
Also, the wisdom of that key is when those that are out there questioning, am I doing good or evil, questioning morality or ethics, a lot of times you can look at this key of wisdom as one of the ways of discerning the answer to that question. Because generally, if you're connecting things, building relationships is about connecting. A lot of life is about connecting. If you're about separating things, generally that's considered darker arts. Generally, that's considered a path of evil or destruction. Generally, it's going to lead to problems.
One of my first witchy, I don't know if I should call her a teacher. We didn't have a formal like teacher student relationship, but she did mentor me. Maybe that's the better term to use. Anytime I was struggling with something, she would always ask me, how does this affect the weave? Well, that was her main way of understanding the universe, is that we are all in this weave. We're all woven in this tapestry. What threads are you pulling on? How are you affecting the weave? That is the wisdom of
I mean,
interdependence.
same thing in science. A lot of science is based on that too. Cause and effect. A lot of physics is this, then that. It's that interconnected between it. Quantum physics likes to play all kinds of madness when it talks about interconnectedness. It's still that everything is connected.
The third key traditionally is Nirvana, which literally means to blow out, to extinguish. It's what you do to a candle. When you're done using a candle, you Nirvana it, you blow it out. This goes back to an early sermon of the Buddha. The fire of desire is burning within me. May I quench that fire. It's, I believe, one of the earliest sections of the Dharmapada where he gives this quench that fire, quench that fire, quench that fire. It's this returning refrain in that teaching. We see it throughout his work. I like to think of Nirvana as liberation. The style of Buddhism that I learned is very much the oracle from the Matrix. What's really going to bake your noodle is when you realize that this and that were the same thing the whole time. That idea of we're riding on the boat of Buddhism. And when we get to the other shore and we have perfectly enlightened ourselves and our eyes are open, we realize there was no boat. There was no river. We didn't actually go anywhere. We just learned to see everything as it really is. And so I see this as liberation. And that's why, to me, this is Sabbath. Sabbath is the day that God rested. It's the day that we rest. But it's the day that we practice the perfect kingdom of God on earth. It's the day that we practice all of the things that we preach. Maybe it's our spirituality day. Maybe it's our being around with friends and family day. Maybe it's our going out and giving to the homeless and helping other people day. Everybody practices their Sabbath differently and on different days of the week. But it's that day of rest where it's not about the responsibilities of our regular life, but it's the day that we practice as if we were living in that perfect world. We're there for friends. We're there for family. We're not there for stress. We're not there for perfection. And I know some of you are like, no, I used to go to church on Sunday. I know. This is why we're trying to build something new.
This is where Sabbath gets so tricky. I like to think of it like that junk drawer in the kitchen, the one that's always got too much stuff in it and is always jammed up because everyone kept throwing things into that junk drawer. That's the problem right now. And a lot of times when you hear Sabbath, because so many rules and practices and actions have been thrown into that junk drawer, a lot of times you need to dump it out, sort it, pick those things that are actually helpful, leave it in the drawer, and then you'll find the drawer is so much more useful because it's not so cluttered. There have been so many things that are like, it must be on Saturday, or it must be on Sunday, or it must be done this way. You have to go to church. All this other like have tos and thou shalts and rules. And no, it's that liberation. It's for that individual practitioner is liberating. For me, I like to think of it as taking that sigh. I suffer from moments of excess neural energy, and my brain just starts running way faster than anything else can process. Like, I can't speak quick enough to keep up with where my brain goes. It just starts, it's almost like teleporting. It just starts blipping ahead way faster than everything else. And just taking that deep sigh, inhaling and exhaling, that's what that liberation is. It's just letting it go. The Sabbath is that practice for each individual, whatever rejuvenates, whatever brings joy, and whatever lets you just let go of everything else.
Even more than that, my connection with this, with the idea of Sabbath and liberation, this idea of Sabbath and Nirvana, came from one day I was doing a Bible study. I like to practice Musar, where you do a little devotional reading, meditating. Sometimes some Lectio Divina gets mixed in there, and really digging into an idea. When Jesus announced his ministry, he read a passage, a prophecy about the one who will bring healing, sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf. And the very last part of that is, and proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. I didn't know what that was. So I started looking. This is the sabbatical year. Every 7 years, according to the Mosaic law, you are to let the ground go fallow. You don't plant. You work for 6 years, storing everything up. So the 7th year, you let the earth heal. You let the earth rest. All debts are forgiven. All slaves are set free. You have a reset every 7 years. All oaths are ended and can be picked up again later. This is the acceptable year of the Lord. It's the Sabbath year. This is one of the missions that Jesus said he was called to, and one of the missions that we are called to. That's liberation. Freedom from all of our oaths and promises. Freedom from all of our obligations. Freedom from having to do all the things that we normally have to do, so that we can discern and pick back up the good ones, the ones that we need to move on. Sabbath is liberation.
A meta-modern approach to this. Very fun for a minute. Once you've recognized this third key is the oscillation between the first two keys.
Yes.
If all life is impermanent, that means no one practice is necessarily going to be correct. It's going to change over time. So in your Sabbath practice, it's taking that moment when you recognize, I have to let all this go. You have to, like I said, it's going off the analogy of that kitchen drawer, dump everything out. The drawer is now empty, but you have to oscillate. So at the same time, you're connecting yourself back in. You're picking up those things that speak most to you, that you're most connected with, and you put them back in the drawer so that when you go back into your work, into creating and doing what you're doing through the rest of your week, your year, whichever cycle this is, and there's actually many cycles, this is what I'm reconnected with for this next cycle.
Yes.
And at the end of that cycle, you dump the drawer out again because all of life is impermanent, but it's also all connected. It's that oscillation between the two.
Back and forth, back and forth, back.
It took me 20 years to really get it. And trust me, I struggled with Sabbath for 20 years. Tried to do all these hard rules and stuff. And it took me a long time and almost a moment of frustration when I finally, going off that analogy, I just threw my hands up, said, forget it, dumped the drawer out, and then realized, oh, wait, yeah, I get it now. It is this actual cathartic cleaning where I'm both recognizing the impermanence and connecting myself back in at the same time. Because that's the thing with an exhale. When you go to blow out a candle, you breathe in first, you exhale to blow out the candle, you breathe in again because you keep breathing. It's actually an oscillation between those states, and it's the journey in between at the same time.
That's the power that we're looking for. I really tend to believe, like, the older I get, the more I realize what wisdom really is trying to help younger people not commit the same mistakes that you.
Yeah.
That it's not actually wisdom as in this like grand, glorious thing that you discover. It's, okay, look, I've messed this up in so many different ways. Here's what I learned. Please learn from my mistakes so that you don't repeat them.
Yeah. Why is Sabbath so important and so sacrosanct and needs to be fought and held on for? Because it is liberation, but at the same time, because it's liberation, if all you're doing is fighting for it, you're enslaving yourself to it itself.
Sabbath was made for the people, not the people for the Sabbath.
Yeah.
But the Sabbath will keep the Sabbath, will keep you if you keep the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So bear that in mind. I hope this has meant something to you. I hope you have connected with these ideas. These are so fundamental and foundational to everything that we talk about. If you want to read more about this, they are included in my essay, A Dream of an Oak Church, which you can find over at wisdomscry.com. We're going to be talking more about all this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can put them in the comments there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, just head over to creationspast.com, click the chat, and you can leave your comments there. If you're listening to us on anything other than those three platforms, they do not notify us about any comments that get left. So sorry, but this is how we've decided to simplify our word flow, because those are the places that we interact with people the most. They've become our priority. While you're over at creationspass.com, if you have a few dollars you can pass our way, you can join up for a membership there. We're going to have some classes coming out over there in the not too distant future, and they will go out to the paid subscribers first and then go out to everybody else after that. Or you can go over to Patreon or Ko-fi and support me there. I am CE Dorset on both, CEDORSETT, and that goes to help us out. Because remember, this isn't us asking for a donation for the Lord. This is to help us keep the lights on, food on our table, and a roof over our heads. Thank you to everybody who does that. We really want to be doing this full time because we feel like there's so much that needs to be done, so much we really want to get done. So thank you to everybody who helps to make that possible. Until next time, may the grace of the One Spirit flow through you to help you to understand that all things change, to help you feel and sense your interconnectedness with all things, and to give you glimpses of liberation and the freedom that is open to all. Amen.
Amen.